Hi, I'm Dr. Helga, and today we'll be talking about the legend of the Ice People. So a little bit about myself. I am currently an assistant professor at the University of Iceland, and my most memorable talk is from the Reykjavik Data Beers, where I was presenting my passion project, Ísfólkið. So what surprised people the most was just something so trivial as Ísfólkið can be a data-driven talk. And not there's just one single aspect, there are many different ways to find data in the literature. So my short 7-minute talk became a 45-minute in-depth discussion, and I will probably go over time because there's so much fun details to find about Margit's wonderful saga. But my take-home message for today is that data is everywhere, and with the right mindset, you can find it. So let's get into it. The backstory is that in 2016, I listened to a hilarious podcast called My Dad Wrote a Porno. And I wanted to do something similar. So I asked my friends if they were willing to do something in that realm with me, but unfortunately, none of our parents wrote erotic novella. So the next best thing is to take something as culturally known as Ísfólkið. So that's how Ískissur came to life. We are three, it's myself, Birna and Kristín, and we would read The Legend of the Ice People. We had never read it before, and so we came in with a fresh and modern take on a very known cult classic from the 80s. And we would cover parts of the book and then always end on a lighter note, which would be the cat of the week, because that's my specialty. And Ísfólkið, what is it? So in case you have been living under a rock and have never heard of it, or just weren't born before the 80s, Ísfólkið is a 47-volume family saga set in historic Scandinavia, and it's filled with mystical elements. Central is Silja Arngrímsdóttir and her beau Þengill the Good, and it's marked by an age-old curse from Þengill the Bad. While Silja's bond with Þengill the Good deepens, the curse's influence and their descendants will wrestle with its implications. It's an epic family struggle with Þengill the Bad, and it culminates in an epic confrontation. Throughout, there are spirits and mandrake roots and other mystical elements that will play a crucial role in assisting the family. So today we will be exploring these 3 data formats. It's the written books, both the ones that were written in the 80s, which were also retranslated in 2007. We will see how this will influence children's names in Iceland, but we will also go and look at the audiobooks on Storytel, which is a streaming service. And then we'll also look at the podcast that I hosted with my friends and how it started on Alvarpið, on Nútíminn, and later on went back to Storytel. But as people would kind of be surprised, this is the most popular content on Storytel. So if we look at the timeline, here we can see all of the publications staggered out throughout the 80s, and then we can see the audiobooks here on the lower half. So in 2016, that's when I get the idea or this notion that we should start a podcast. And then in spring 2017, it goes live on Alvarpið, and we have a relatively good start. Then we have quite some troublesome scheduling difficulties, and there becomes a very slow time for us. But fortunately, in 2019, early 2019, Storytel contacts us and basically wants us to go on their platform. So they take over all the annoying post-processing stuff that we are not good at, and we can instead do the fun stuff, which is just reading the books and trying to make sense of it. Also, before I go on, this is when the books are released on, the ebooks are released on Storytel, so we're slightly ahead of the curve. And then this is when Storytel starts releasing the audiobooks. So they conclude towards end of 2019, and we are 1 year longer. So let's go to the books. Margit is a Norwegian author. She lived predominantly in Sweden and she wrote in Swedish. She was a late bloomer. She started writing at the age of 40, showcasing it's never too late to follow your dreams. And she was the best-selling author in the Scandinavian countries. Her most known work are The Legend of the Ice People, or Isfolkið, published in the 80s, and then she would follow up with the series on the Warlock and The Legend of the Realm of Light, which are spin-offs of the family we're covering today. But as we can see, this is more than 20 years of work with this family and this family saga, and it's truly remarkable that her dedication and just the amount of content she produces throughout this time. For the publications, I have the page counts and the structure for all the written books from the 80s. It's a total of 47 books over a very busy 8 years, which means she was releasing a book every 8 to 9 weeks. And the average book is around 170 pages. She starts relatively long, but then you see there's a very steady decline. So, and towards the end, she ramps it back up. But she does note that in her final book, she talks about her writing experience and she talks about her writer's fatigue and just not actually knowing what she's doing or where she's going to take these characters. So it is quite interesting that she kind of starts writing these shorter books because she doesn't really have anywhere for them to go. So it's interesting. With the audiobooks, we have a very active fan base. Over 1,000 people listened and reviewed the first book. And there's a very steady review count around 500 people or so. But as you can see, there are more people that review the last book than the predecessors, but most likely they read them all. So it kind of goes to show that not everyone reviews all the time. But their releases were very methodical. It was always on Thursdays, and they were spaced to 1 to 2 weeks apart over a 16-month period. So this is also to keep engagement, to have active subscriptions, and keep people wanting for more. The ratings are quite commendable. It's a very high 4.4 star rating out of 5. And as we can see, the dip in ratings towards the end is concurrent with what I said before, that Margit does talk about writer's fatigue, and the ratings shows that the readers are noticing a decrease in quality and therefore lower ratings. But this noticeable dip here, we can see that when we look at the narrators. So the narrators over the series were 4. They were very distinct. They would have different ways to do their narrations. This particular narrator would do more of a radio play style. And because there are quite many characters she has to do voices for, it becomes a bit overwhelming for the listener, and the ratings reflect that. So she quickly quit, and another narrator took over, and she did more than half the series. Overall, it's around 18,000 minutes worth of content of this medieval romantic fantasy. So if you're interested, there's enough to take on. But if you think this is a bit overwhelming, there's too much content to listen to, the books are actually shorter. So what you can see from the data is that the reading pace is becoming slower with shorter books. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but yeah. But all of the narrators are great in their own distinct way. I recommend all of them. But to the podcast. So we were on 2 platforms. We were on the free and open syndication on Alvarpið on Nútíminn, and then we moved over to Storytel, which was the paid for subscription service. So when we were on Alvarpið, it was more of a free form kind of style because we were doing it ourselves and it was kind of more like what we were feeling that day. And you can see there's a lot of lag between inter-episodes on Alvarpið, and that's just because we had difficulties, like technical difficulties because we were taping at different locations. But once we're in Storytel, all that burden is off our shoulders, which is quite good. And then it's much more steady. The average length is around an hour, slightly longer on Storytel, but not by much. But if we look at like on Alvarpið, we would start with one book a chapter because we thought there was so much interesting stuff going on. It's worth an hour to talk about each chapter. Needless to say, this is not sustainable, so we made a compromise and did 2 chapters per episode. Also not really sustainable. So thank God we wrote a contract that they said we can do 7 chapters per episode, which is at least doable. So, but we did 5.5 books, and that's, like I said before, we were cut short just due to technical difficulties. But what we see there, that the data says that we have around 40 listeners through the browser, but I have it on good authority, around 800 to 1,000 people would listen through other streaming services. So, but what I do have is that the ratings. So when we go over to Storytel, we can measure the quality of our content. And it's not bad. It's 4.74 out of 5. More than half have a perfect score. So I am quite proud of our work. And only 7 episodes go below 4. So not too shabby. However, the numbers can be misleading because there are not that many reviews behind the rating. So out of the total, there are 444 people or individual reviews behind the podcast compared to the 25,000 reviews for the audiobooks. So we are definitely a very small fish in a big pond. But the silver lining is we at least had 1 active fan throughout the entire period, but generally they were 4. We did all this work for 4 people so they didn't have to read themselves. So it's job well done. But overall, there were 142 episodes. We did manage to do all of the books in in a short amount of time and through Margit fashion. So I am quite pleased with ourselves. But let's go into the actual data behind Ísfólkið. Here we have in front of us their family tree. It starts here at the top with Þengill and Silja, as I discussed before. They are the matriarch and all of their descendants. So what we can see here, this is very condensed. So like I said before, one of the reasons the first narrator left Storytel was partially due to this. There's a lot of incestuous relationships described, which when you're reading it, you don't really feel bad about it. She makes sense of it in a weird way, but yeah, there's a lot of incest. And so, but the good thing is that due to this incestuous family, we can plot a 17th generation in a single slide. So, it's not all bad. Here I have color-coded the people that have the curse. So those that are yellow are benevolent, the green are the malevolent, and the pink ones are the redeemed ones. And the books say that every generation should have an individual with the curse. There are a few notable exceptions. For instance, there is the 3 cousins that all had the disease, which was a very fun time in the series when you read that. Like when those 3 are together, it was like a lot of drama. But then you see there are some generations that just miss out on a curse. So why is that? And is there something in the data that we can see without actually reading? So when we do a data transformation, and now we have a Gantt chart, something you would generally think of for project management, but why not do a visual for concurrent lives of characters? So here we have the family tree after the data transformation, and now we can see how many people are actually living at any given time point. So there is roughly 20 people in the family at any time. And towards the end, they kind of know that the big confrontation is coming, so they can kind of go wild and have more kids because, the curse is almost done. So it's, they're home scot-free. And there are some interesting things. Generally, there's always 1 to 2 person with the curse alive at any given time point. But then here, in the 1700s, there is a distinct surge. Then there are 6 people. 3 of them are of the famous 3 cousins that have their weird love triangle. And then we also see Mar. And Mar is not actually of the ice people lineage. He is of the Tarangai lineage. So when you read the books, I think Margit realized that she forgot to give someone the curse, so she writes him in, and she writes a backstory about how actually there is another family of the same evil Thengilda bad, and they got the curse. So that's why you sometimes get it, but not always, but you had it for a very consistent amount of time. So as having been working in genetics before, this family tree is not very lifelike or real life. But some things are. But what's interesting about the ice people ancestry is that unlike what we are accustomed to, we don't have an age distribution like the bell curve. We have a bimodal distribution. And the reason is actually quite simple. The women generally die giving childbirth, and that's due to the curse. The people that have the curse have a distinct figure. They have triangular shapes. So as they are being born, the mother dies. And the descriptions are quite brutal and disgusting. So, but you can skip those parts quite fast in the books. So that's why that's why the women die quite early or die young. But if they do manage to live through childbirth, they live long lives. Exceptionally long lives, considering this is supposed to be in the 16th, 17th, and 1800s. They live until 70 or maybe even past the 100. So, but Margit is good in the sense she is very symmetric. She makes sure that the men also share the same traits. So since they don't give childbirth, she just makes the men very reckless. And they usually come to an early demise because they do something stupid. So they also die around 20. But if they go over this, reckless period, they settle down and are calm, and then they live long lives just as the women. So, but going into the family tree and just how incestuous it is, more than half are pure blood, which is crazy. So they have, well, maybe not like very related, but both descendants are from the same family. And 1/3 are unrelated, so muggles, if you use Harry Potter terminology. And only 15%, the remaining 50% are then half-blood. So quite incestuous. But, so let's go into the children of the story. Like we saw before, the women would tend to die quite young, around 20, and that makes sense. The average age of mother's first child is around 23 years old. So we have 22 kids, or 1/3, that don't have a parent. And that's not due to immaculate conception, just because of abandonment. So the curse does have this effect on people that they just don't want to take care of these children. So it's a very stark and grim reality for these people. But what we do see, there are some social norms that we can mirror in our life. And that's the fact that 85% of all marriages have an older man compared to a woman. And that age difference is generally 3 years. But yeah, back to Iceland. Here I have the census data for all the names that appear in the books. And if we look at the year of publication, I wanted to see if there was a notable distinction of the names before and after their release. And as it turns out, there are 8 names that there is a statistical difference in naming. We have, for instance, Sunna is increased 4-fold, Silja's double, and Saga has a whopping 5-fold jump compared to the normal. And what's also interesting is that names like Yrja, Þula, Heikir, and Viljar had never before been seen in Icelandic census. And they come shortly after the books are released. But then we have names like Villimey, which is a very prominent person in the books, but there's no one in the census that has that. That's probably due to Icelandic naming laws rather than anything else. But then there are other names like Þengill. You would kind of assume would have a search. There is not, but these are the ones that did. Although I don't think Sölvi is due to Margit Sandemo because he's quite a bad character in the books. So that's probably some other figure. So he's named Sölvi despite of Sölvi in the Ísfolkið. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. I would love to be present with you, but while this is going to be aired, I'm going to be in Italy with my incredible co-hosts. So I would just like to take this opportunity and say thank you. Thank you for Alvarpið and Storytel for giving us a platform to share this, weird journey with us. And to our only fan, all 4 of you, thank you for listening. My deepest gratitude to the organizers for having me on, and for Reykjavík Database for giving me the notion of maybe this would be a good data talk. And yeah, also Margit for being a very big impact for 4 years of my life. Yeah, thank you. The data is available on GitHub and you can reach out. Thank you.